part 2 of Singapore politics. Here is, in my opinion, how the GRC system should work if the PAP meant well, were more well-meaning. The majority of seats will be single seats, will be single member constituencies. The majority of them, 60%, whereas 40% of them can be GRCs. So then that will ensure the minority representation. And the GRCs should be much smaller. They should only have 3 members. They should only have 3 members for each GRC. 3 MPs. That way you will ensure that there is a minority representation in Parliament through the GRC system and making the first past the post system more democratic. So, the PAP, the People's Action Party, how have they governed Singapore all these years? Well, they have adopted numerous policies from left-leaning to right, economically and socially. They're a pragmatic party. They adopt policies that work. They are technocrats. People get positions of governance. People get positions in the government, like ministers, which are, by the way, the most highly paid ministers in the world, through qualifications. Who's the most qualified? Not who's your political friend, but who's the most qualified. So if you are the most qualified person, you will get positions in the government. You will get a ministry, for example. Or you will be nominated to become a PAP MP, or a nominated member of Parliament without consent of the voters. So they choose the most qualified people, technocrats, and that's one way they've maintained their economic prosperity. Here's what they do. They allow opposition, but here's what the PAP think of the opposition. The way they approach opposition is not let them sit on the other side of the aisle and let us confront them. No, let us ask them why they are opposing us. Give us your ideas and we will think about it. That's why there's the nominated member of Parliament scheme. These are people who have found, the nominated members of Parliament are people who have not entered politics, but have contributed to Singapore society in many great ways. They say, you're not part of the political process? Why don't you start? Let's nominate you. Why don't you come into the Parliament and tell us your ideas? That's also the idea of the non-constituency member of Parliament. They are called in. You got a significant amount of votes, so that means some of your ideas appeal to the people. So let's hear what they are and see if we can work with it. So basically that's how they approach it, how they approach opposition. However, the PAP feel that they are entitled to govern and that no opposition should be allowed to take over. So they make numerous ways so they do numerous strategies on marginalizing opposition from election, how do I say this? Chances of being elected and taking over. For example, their favorite strategy on keeping their political opponents at bay is suing them for defamation. Lee Kuan Yew in particular is notorious for suing people for libel, for defamation. They do this, they sue them, and they're bankrupt and they cannot run for political office. That's pretty mean, but they might have a point, because you have to, like I said, you have to contribute ideas and they'll see if it works. If you attack them, if you make accusations of them not being well-meaning, accusing them of being dictators, accusing them of being greedy, accusing them of being corrupt, or accusing them of crimes, or accusing them of whatever, and then you don't have any hard proof of it, then that's character assassination and you'll be sued for it. So they might have a point in suing their political opponents, although they're notorious for doing that. So it's like people don't understand this in some Western countries because the libel laws are not as often used, and people don't understand it that much in the United States. If you say a lie on Fox, for example, the people on Fox News tell lies, they can invoke their First Amendment rights. Even though what they say is outright lies, they can say whatever they want. In other countries, it doesn't work that way. If you say something that ruins someone's reputation and you have no proof of it, if you're just spreading lies, you'll be sued for it. That's understandable. So, in a way, so like I said, this is a criticism towards the opposition in Singapore. Find proof that the PAP are doing a bad job. But then again, if you point out their flaws, they'll adjust to them. Now, I understand this. It's just that I don't like the PAP politicians because they have this sense of we're entitled to run this country and no one else is. In fact, some of them are notorious for saying this, that because Singapore is a small city-state with no natural resources and a small population, because of that, only a certain group of people can run the country. Only the PAP, only this group of people are capable of running the country. That sounds very racist, actually, to be frank. Very racist. Are you telling me in a country of 5 million people, with over 2 million eligible voters, are you telling me that people who refuse to be part of the political establishment cannot run the country either? Cannot run the country? Are you telling me that there's no qualified people out there unless they're in the political establishment? The PAP, the one political party that's entitled to rule. That is extremely offensive. So there's one bit of criticism for the PAP. However, you can dislike the PAP. They behave like bullies by saying such things and suing people for defamation and making sometimes outrageous statements. Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong, for example, one time said that if there were like 20 opposition MPs elected, he would not spend the time serving the country but fixing the opposition, he said. I don't know what he meant by that. Or when Lee Kuan Yew, his father, said if there was a surprise election result, like if they lost power all of a sudden, unexpectedly, the military would have to step in. They've made these outrageous statements, and of course suing for defamation. I think I said that previously, yeah. So you may not like the PAP, you may think of them as bullies. However, you cannot argue with success, economic prosperity, and clean and orderly streets. You cannot argue with success. What I'm saying is, I wouldn't run the country the way they are. So perhaps because I don't like their style, but perhaps then that disqualifies me from running for office. That disqualifies me because my attitude says their way is wrong, when in reality it has produced results. So when I said all these criticisms of the PAP, only some of them stick, because you cannot argue with success. So far only one bit of criticism sticks, is what their outrageous statement that is insulting to the Singaporean people, which is that only a small group of people, the elite, is able to run this country. The second bit of criticism that I would say sticks is the lack of freedom to protest. Protest and expressing your concerns or your complaints openly is part of the democratic process. Well, if you criticize the government, why don't you enter parliament? That's one way of tackling the issue. Let's listen to your ideas and we'll see if they work. But nobody can openly protest in Singapore unless they're allowed a license to protest, which they rarely are issued. And which is why they also created something called Speaker's Corner. Don't ask me about that, where someone can openly express their views in one certain area. Now, one final bit here. The presidential election. They have an elected presidency, but the presidency is mostly ceremonial. Except when it comes to the president's custodial powers of managing the country's reserves from past government surpluses. So that is a tremendous responsibility of the president. Other than that, he's mostly ceremonial role. The executive role remains mostly in the cabinet and the prime minister. President is ceremonial role. Now the presidential election, first past the post, there is one bit of criticism that I cannot argue with. It's that candidates must have been a CEO of a company which has a paid up capital of just about 100 million Singapore dollars. That's because they have to manage the country's reserves. And so you need to be the best qualified. After all, I said Singapore is a technocracy. However, that sends a really wrong message to the voters. Singapore is not a corporation, it's a country. You don't see a country as a money-making machine. You see a country as, well, a country, a nation. The welfare of the people is what's important, not the profit motive. So you're treating the country as a corporation and not a country that it is. It sends the wrong message. But again, that bit of criticism, as well as the suing for libel and everything else, that bit of criticism does not stick because you cannot argue with success. So I'm not qualified to run Singapore because I refuse to behave the way Lee Kuan Yew and Lee Hsien Loong do. And recently, in the general election of 2011, an opposition party called the Workers' Party won a GRC. They won 5 seats automatically because they won a GRC. Surprise, surprise. As well as an additional single member constituency. So that brings a total of 6 elected opposition MPs. The reason why they won that GRC was they took a page out of the PAP's playbook. They set forward qualified candidates, not opposition for opposition's sake, but these are genuinely people with good ideas and are intelligent and are capable if there was capable of running an alternative government. They set forward genuinely qualified candidates, unlike in the past, I would say. Unlike in the past where opposition politicians attack the government without proof that that their policies are bad for the country. Finally, I would like to make a statement that I like Singapore, but I wouldn't want to live there because there's a 2-year military service you have to serve, conscription, and then you have to serve in the army for 2 years. That's longer than some other countries, by the way, than most other countries. And I don't really like living in a big city. I need some greenery around me. So I like Singapore, but it wouldn't be for the city for me. But again, economic prosperity and great place to go shopping. So I may not like the people running Singapore, but I must congratulate them on their success, on the economic prosperity they have given. I congratulate you, and I concede that I am unqualified to run the country. Well, unqualified to run any country, but specifically because I cannot do what you did. So, thank you for listening.